I was sent to the local hospital, and the local hospital back then was, I would say, about 12 miles away. And the spasms or whatever was happening to me happened a couple of times while I was in hospital. I was in a children's ward. I'm not sure for how long. I think probably a week, maybe 2 weeks. I made lots of friends on the children's ward, and also there was a tutor there, and I always remember really looking forward to doing all my work, my homework there, or I guess kind of like when children were in hospital, they had to continue with their schooling. Other children used to get cards from their schools and so forth. I don't even think my mum even told the school that I was in hospital, or my school. I didn't receive any cards from school. In fact, I don't think many people really knew that I was in hospital. My mum did visit me though. Boy, did she visit, which was, you know, a good thing to do. I'm not suggesting it was awful all of the time. I am just telling you what I recall, and how I felt as a child. And she did visit, and I remember her telling me once what an inconvenience it was, because it cost so much to get there. I'm not sure whether it was petrol money she went on about, or bus fare, I don't know. And for the first time ever, I snapped. I'd had so many talks when I was in hospital. Social workers and nurses, I'm not sure who, but I knew they were people of importance, and they kept asking me about my home life. They kept asking me how things were. I lied. I wish I hadn't, but I lied. And I said everything was okay. I wish I hadn't, but I lied. Would have been, if you like, my ticket out of there, but I lied. I snapped at my mother when she said how much it cost to come and see me, what an inconvenience it was. And I told her, wish I'd told the doctors about the arguments, about the shouting. I never said anything about my uncle, my granddad, or my father. I'm not even sure if she did know. I don't know. I know she knew about my uncle. I know that for sure, which we'll get on to later. Yes, my father did abuse me. And we will get to that too. That memory is the hardest to write down, and possibly even now at 52 difficult to talk about. The first man in your life you are supposed to feel safe with. The first man in your life as a little girl you are supposed to feel safe with, that you can trust. Yes, my father abused me from a very, very young age. That man who you are supposed to trust. But I did snap at my mum. I never told anybody though. I never told anybody about the shouting, about how it was at home. I just didn't. I lied and I said everything was okay. So coming out of hospital, they never found out what was wrong with me. I'm sure it's probably somewhere on my record somewhere. For me now, where I am as a human being living a human life, or a spiritual person living a human life, I just know I was so protected and so looked after. After coming out of hospital though, my mum did become quite kinder for a little while. She was quite nice, and the atmosphere in the house changed. Not for long though. I think it's safe to say my parents' marriage was horrific, absolutely horrific. My mother was a victim, a moaner. She was nasty, she was bitter. My father went to work, he went to the pub. They never spoke. When they were together, it was bickering. My dad never really bought my mum anything, birthdays, etc. And boy, did we know it. Rant. Their life was miserable. And so if you are living in that miserable atmosphere, then you kind of become miserable too. It was not long after I came out of hospital that we were all sitting in the living room, and my two brothers, there was my two brothers, my mum and my dad were sitting in the living room, and mum was going to go to work in the pub, and my dad had a darts match. He was involved in darts, in snooker, football, dominoes, typical working man's club. Always had enough money for a couple of pints and cigarettes. Our living room bellowed with smoke, but back then, I guess that's how it was. It was the 70s, early 70s, kind of late 60s. Mum was getting ready to go to work, always dolled herself up. She was always painting her nails, putting her makeup on, all done in the living room, on her knee with a little mirror, with sort of I just remember this makeup bag, putting powder on her nose and so forth. And I remember asking her, is Nana babysitting? And my mum said, no, my uncle is. And my brothers then said, don't want him coming. Don't want uncle to babysit. And the reply was, don't be silly. And my brother said, but we don't like the things he does to Deborah. And my mum asked what he did. And I couldn't remember, if I'm honest, what was said. But all I remember was my mum getting up and going out in the car. And we were left on our own. And my mother just turned around to me and to my brothers and said, behave. And that was it. My uncle never came to the house again. I do remember my dad saying, though, we best stop now. My mum asked, is anybody else doing this to you? What uncle's doing? I lied. I lied. When I next saw my granddad, he took me to the shed, and I remember him saying, just like my dad, he won't come near you now. It's just me and you. It was horrific. I was confused. I didn't know what to do, what to think, and I don't even know how to convey this over to you. My granddad said, when they found out about my uncle, don't worry, it's just me and you now. Little did he know, it was granddad and dad. I write this and I think, oh my God, and I tell you this and I just think, how did I survive this? But do you know what? Going through my life and listening to other people, actually my story isn't as bad as some people. So I'm very, very grateful that I have not suffered as much as other people. But do you know what? When I look back and I think, how did I survive? To me, this was normal. Half an hour in the shed with my granddad, then jam sandwiches and a cup of tea with my nan. That was normal to me. It was not long after my brother had said about my uncle that we moved to our brand new council house in the village. And I had my own room. Not just a room off my brother's room, but my own room. I was never sexually abused in that house. My dad stopped. Well, he stopped in the house. My granddad carried on until he passed, but never in that house, because he never, ever, ever came to that house. I remember going to our new house, and when we moved, I said I wanted to be called Debbie, not Deborah. I was Deborah. Up until the day we moved into that new house. I said I wanted to be called Debbie. Not the Debbie today. I spelt it D-E-B-B-I-E. I changed my name. Again, the spelling of my name. As I evolved, as I accepted and realised my own self-worth. A new house, but still miserable parents. Bicker, 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 nasty words, shouting, slamming doors. Just horrid. I loved the bathroom. I'll tell you why I loved the bathroom, because it was upstairs. So I was in the bathroom, I could hear somebody coming upstairs. It had a downstairs toilet too. I know this sounds crazy, but it still felt safe. Having a bathroom upstairs was just amazing for me. Absolutely amazing. I felt so safe. And having my own room with a door. I used to lose myself in my bedroom. I would lose myself in books. I was an early reader and I loved reading, getting lost in stories, mostly in the early years by Enid Blyton. So enchanted trees, fairies, pixies, magic, a lot of imagination. I loved the Faraway Trio, the Enchanted Forest, the Famous Five, the Secret Seven. And as I got older, the Brontes fascinated me. And I would read in my head to my friend who would take turns reading. So my lovely, lovely friend who used to sit on those stairs steps in my old house came to my new house with me. And she'd sit on my bed with me, and we would read and we would read and we would read. And I would avoid going to my granddad's house by saying I just wanted to stay at home and read. Back then, parents left their kids on their own. I mean, what could have happened to me that already hadn't? So the abuse from my grandfather lessened and lessened because I didn't need to go. I didn't need to be looked after. I had my own room, I had my books, and I had my lovely imaginary friend who I now know as my beautiful, beautiful spirit guide, who still to this day looks after me, supports me, protects me, and is just wonderful. So I cannot thank my spirit guide enough. So believe me, if you ever think you can't make it, you can't get through something, find that inner strength, because that inner strength is your guide telling you that you can carry on. So we moved to this lovely new this new council house where I had my own room, where I'd spend hours and hours reading. It was lovely. The local school, my school, was just kind of like a 5-minute walk away. I don't know what happened to my uncle. Never ever knew what happened to my uncle until I challenged my mother possibly a couple of years ago. And again, that's kind of later on in my story. But my uncle never babysat again. I very rarely went to visit my nana and my granddad because I would just say I want to stay at home and read. And my father never abused me inside that house. So that house never ever saw sexual abuse. It saw bickering, it saw verbal abuse, but it never ever saw sexual abuse. Losing myself in stories full of fairies and magic and enchanted forests and beautiful relationships of friends on big adventures was wonderful. Reading Treasure Island, and then later on, as I got older, Wuthering Heights and Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility. I just absolutely loved losing myself in storybooks. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I hope you'll join me continuing with my story. Page 11 is going to be quite difficult for me to read, so please bear with me. But thank you again. And remember, if you are affected by this story, please don't sit in silence. Please tell somebody. Somebody will believe you. I will believe you. Bye.